Radio Free Palmer 89.5 KVRF presents Mushing Radio, hosted by Robert Forto. Mushing Radio is about dog-powered sports, living in the Great White North, and mushing. Visit our website at mushingradio.com. Here is your host, Robert Forto.
Hello and welcome everybody. This is Robert Forto and you're listening to Mushing Radio here on KVRF 89.7 in the Matsu Valley. RadioFreePalmer.org is our live streaming site and you can hear all of our episodes over on dogworksradio.com. Be sure to check us out on social media by searching Dogworks Radio. And today we have a very special guest calling in. Her name is Della Severtson and she's calling in from Fairbanks, Alaska. Della, how's it going today?
Oh, it's wonderful. How are you, Robert?
I am well, thank you. Thank you for joining us. I know it's going to be a very busy off season for you and the Yukon Quest, but before we jump in and start talking about the race, you have been on our show a couple of times, I believe, already, and this is a new capacity for you, but before we jump into it, can you tell us who you are and what you're all about, please?
Well, I am currently a sitting board member for the Yukon Quest, a brand new one. Just came on board this past spring. And I'm a former Yukon Quest board member as well as former office employee for the Yukon Quest. I've been involved in the sled dog community for, I guess, since 2011 was my first introduction to sled dogs, 2010-11 racing season, and I've been hooked ever since.
And you are a previous musher. I know you've gotten out of the sport, so to speak, at least on a hands-on level, but you have some experience behind the sled, don't you?
Yes, I participated in the Northern Lights 300. And finished.
That's a pretty big accomplishment, especially for a 300-mile race. And unfortunately, that race is no longer around. And that's interesting that I bring that up because you guys have been faced with some of those same difficulties with the Yukon Quest. Before we jump in and talk about that, what is your role with the Yukon Quest as we talk today?
Well, currently I'm a board member, as I'm what we call our board members directors. The non-officer board members are titled directors. So I'm a board member director. And because of my past history of licensing, marketing, and sponsorship procurement, I was asked by my peers and volunteered my services to do that. So I'm actively contacting our former sponsors, current sponsors, and working up proposals, ideas, packets, etc. for prospective sponsors that we would like to have partner with us.
So just recently, my co-host Alex Stein and I did a show about what we think about the 2021 Yukon Quest as it standed when we recorded the episode. I think we recorded it back in mid-June or so, but it just dropped here on the broadcast a couple of weeks ago. And we talked about some of the information that you guys released during the pandemic about changing up the race a little bit, having 2 races instead of 1, where you're going to have a start in Fairbanks and also a start in Whitehorse. And a lot of that is because of the uncertainty of the COVID-19 pandemic. And of course, a lot of it has to do with travel and sponsorships and just about every other possible thing that is happening in the sled dog world. And you reached out to me earlier this week to talk a little bit about that, maybe make some clarifications and some exciting things that are going to move forward. Is that right?
That's correct. You know, we're both boards are still in the planning phases of how to move forward with an individual race on each side of the international Canadian-USA border. It is a difficult, running the 1,000-mile race is relatively simple in the fact that we've done it since 1984. We've done that, right? So we know both sides of the border know what needs to be done, et cetera, et cetera. And now in these pandemic times, nobody's certain about what's going to happen, right? And even companies that have supported us as a given, basically a given. It's like, of course we're going to be there. Even some of those corporations and companies are like, well, we're not quite certain what's happening. We're not quite certain, and so it's turning into be an interesting process. But that said, 2021, there will be a race on the U.S. side, which I'm on the U.S. border, so I'll speak to the U.S. what I know about that. So we put on a 300-mile race every other year, regardless. So that is, as of today, it's my understanding that we are still doing that. We're still discussing the thoughts and the planning and the logistics of a 500-mile race, what that looks like. Because, a 500-mile race, it would be lovely to go to Circle and back, right, the Yukon River, and just turn around and come back on the same trail. However, some of the difficulties with that is that's really a tough trail.
Right.
And it is, it is 1 month prior to another 1,000-mile race. And some of the mushers that traditionally do the 1,000-mile Yukon Quest then go on to do the 1,000-mile Iditarod. And so, I don't know, it's just we're still working out all the specifics, but we are moving forward with having a race.
I'm looking forward to it, especially a little bit different format. And when Alex and I recorded our episode, one of our big talking points was the border crossing into Canada. Right now, that's very restrictive coming in or going out. For folks that may not know, even if you're traveling from Alaska down to the 48, say you're moving or, pick up on a new car or whatever, they have very strict restrictions, meaning that you only have a few days to get in and a few days to get out. And if you don't, you have very restrictive fines. It's one of the toughest borders in the world right now to travel through, being Canada. So my first question to you, Della, I don't know if you know this in terms of logistics or whatnot, but in a typical Yukon Quest year where you start either in Fairbanks or Whitehorse and it alternates years, you have folks that are coming in to race from all over the world. You not only have Americans, but you have Canadians and French folks. And if you have two races, one in Canada and one in the U.S., how do you guys anticipate handling that? Will everybody that's racing in Canada, will they only be Canadian? Will the folks in Alaska only be Alaskan? What are your thoughts on that, or do you know?
Well, of course, it all depends on, my personal view on it is come one, come all. If you want to race the Yukon Quest, we want to help you to do that. We want to support you in that choice, and we welcome you. However, the governments of both of the countries of the United States of America and Canada have very strict rules and regulations in place to help prevent the spread and subsequent possible deaths of humans. So, currently, to the best of my knowledge, the Yukon Territory, the last time I looked at the provincial website and went to the travel section, they were okay with travel through their territory, provided that from the time you crossed the border, you were out of their territory in 24 hours, meaning back into the United States.
Yeah,
so
that's
it. That's basically impossible for the Yukon Quest 1,000-mile race to happen because we cross the border in the middle of the wilderness, and of course they do check in with the RMCP, our CMP, and present their proper paperwork and things like that, and the handlers do have to cross the border in normal years. And this year, even if they tentatively opened the border, or even if they said, yes, we'll let the Yukon Quest happen it doesn't mean that once the handlers get to the border that they're going to be able to go through. Traveled that border knows that that's a real possibility.
It's definitely challenging times indeed. So my next question to you, Della, and again, I know that logistics are still being worked out, but in the current format, the Yukon Quest 300 is considered an Iditarod qualifier, meaning that is one of the very few 300-mile races that are still left up in Alaska for folks that are trying to run Iditarod in the next couple of years. So will that Yukon Quest 300 still happen is my first part of that question. And the second part of that, if it doesn't, what are your thoughts on that? And then the third part of that question, Della, is if you have the Yukon Quest 300 and also this new iteration of the Yukon Quest, whether it be a 300 or a 500 on both sides. What about qualifying for that race? Can a person enter that race that may not have done, the qualifiers for Yukon Quest, etc.?
Right. So to answer the first portion of the question, as you stated, we put on that 300-mile qualifier every other year anyway, and it is our traditional year to put on that race. It's an odd year. So, on odd years, the race starts in Fairbanks, and we have the 300-mile qualifier as well as the 1,000-mile start. So, yes, to the best of my knowledge, as far as all of the information I've received through today, we are doing the 300-mile race. Now, the 500-mile race, that is still so to answer the second part of the question, if that doesn't happen, it would have to be, I'm not sure what would have to take place for that not to happen. Maybe resources, volunteers, those types of things. Of course, all sled dog races depend on volunteers. And if you don't have that workforce, that volunteer workforce, it can make it very difficult. And so we, like every other race, rely on our volunteers. They are the backbone of what makes this race happen. And, and then of course there's the allocation of funds by corporations to nonprofit entities such as ourselves in their annual fiscal planning. So it's a matter of waiting, most corporations do that in the October-November timeframe. They do their fiscal planning for the upcoming year in the fall. And it's kind of a wait and see what their boards decide and what their funding monies are going to look like. So it can be it's an uncertain future going forward, and if the race doesn't happen, I personally will be very sad. But it's not going to make me stop working, and it would be an unprecedented. Well, it's already an unprecedented race year for us, not crossing the border, having joint board decision of not crossing the border and just working on individual races. But it's also an unprecedented year. It would be an unprecedented year if the Yukon Quest did not have a race. Period. Because since 1984, we've run a race. We've had a race. And so the third part of the question, refresh my memory.
The third part of the question is, if you do have both of those, in order to run the Yukon Quest right now, there are, and I don't know them as well as I know Iditarod, but there is a qualification to run that race. If you do not have the Yukon Quest 300 and you have this iteration of two 500-milers on each side, are those qualifications still intact, even though it's not a 1,000-mile race anymore?
Well, that's a very good question, and that's a question a lot of people are asking, and they're wanting to know. And we have a rules committee who have been meeting, and they have been discussing any and all thoughts surrounding the rules and how a shortened race is going to affect that, and what are the qualifiers going to be. And the rules committee are working very hard, and they are being proactive, and they've got all that planned out. And they don't have it all planned out yet, but they're waiting on the final decisions from both sides, both boards, to then move forward on specific rule amending and changes.
I definitely want to get into the sponsorship side here in just a second, but I have a couple of more questions in regard to being able to put on this race. As you know, being involved with races up here in Alaska, you had mentioned the Northern Lights 300. You know how fast these races fill up. A lot of times they fill up if it's online. If you sign up at midnight, they're full by 12:30 in the morning. If you send it in by mail. They do a lottery system, and often folks are left off, even though they send in that application the first day. So what I am most curious about more than anything with this whole thing with the Yukon Quest is the ability to forecast, because as you know, most mushers are making plans for these races right now, because often these applications or this application window opens around the first week of October. So if you guys have not figured it out yet by October, and let's say a rookie musher is thinking about signing up for their qualifiers, and they sign up for the Copper Basin and the Willow 300 and whatever, but they need a second 300-mile race, and it's the Yukon Quest 300, and you guys haven't figured it out yet, and they don't sign up for another one, they could potentially be out of the ability to qualify if you guys have not made decisions fast enough. What are your thoughts on that?
That's absolutely correct. Your views and thoughts and mentioning of that is one of the key factors that we're looking at. How are we affecting mushers' abilities to choose their race schedule for the year? And we have, for the U.S. side, and I can only speak for the U.S. side. I'm not on the Yukon board. I'm on the Alaska board. The Alaska side, we are having the official sign-up date will be in October. So, for any mushers out there listening and thinking about their race schedule for 2021, the Yukon Quest, you can put us in the calendar for sign up in October. That date has not been, the specific date hasn't been picked yet. There's lots of discussions as to, when are the other races putting up their sign up dates? What changes are they having to do for the upcoming season, et cetera, et cetera. So we're looking at other race venues, websites, the rules committee and the president of our board is speaking with the other races and their presidents and their organizers to see what they're doing, when they're doing it, so that we don't overlap, so that we're not in competition for people to sign up, and that, individuals who have always wanted to and need that 300 qualifier will have the opportunity to do that in 2021. Because, let's face it, the pandemic is not going to last forever. And we're moving forward with 1,000-mile race planning for 2022. So it's just a lot of, there are a lot of variables that are hard to grasp at this stage because of all of the other changing daily events happening out there in the world. So it's really hard me personally, I always feel like I'm playing catch up. It's like, wow, I can't get ahead of the curve.
Right. Della, I don't mean to cut you off, but I want to make sure that we talk about some of this sponsorship stuff, because that is a very important aspect to your race as well as others. And I have a few questions, so hopefully we can keep the answers relatively short, but at least provide some good information and then pass along some further commentary as we go back and forth. So my first question to you is, I know you're involved with the sponsorship side of it, at least on the American side, and sponsorship dollars are tough to come by, whether it's the Iditarod, the Yukon Quest, the small races here in the lower 48 or even in Alaska. Those dollars are precious. So if I'm a small business owner and I'm thinking about investing my dollars into a sled dog race, and I want to do it into the Yukon Quest, if I'm having to choose between the Alaska race or the Canadian race, where do I send my money? Why do I think that the Alaska race should get my money before the Canadian race, etc.?
Oh, that is such a difficult question. And that's a personal choice. I mean, really, are you Canadian by birth and you have a great love for your country, or do you have some sort of tie to the Americans? Do you prefer Alaska over the Yukon Territory? I don't know. It's like, I guess one could research the demographics and the amount of individuals who are reached on the Canadian side versus the U.S. side versus, which all comes down to media and marketing, right? Public relations and marketing. So, and that's an individualized, that's difficult. That's a very difficult question to answer. Why give your dollars to the Americans versus the Canadians? It's all a personal, that's a personal choice on a company's part, and it's all relative.
And I think you had mentioned demographics. I think that's an important key because anytime you sponsor anything, you're looking for a return on your investment, whether it's for a sled dog race or, the local 5K or whatever. You're looking to see what you can get back for the dollars that you put in, unless it's just an in-kind gift where you're saying, hey, here's my money, do with it as you please. So I agree with you. It is a very individualized decision. So my next question to you, Della, is, we are in unprecedented times. Lots of things are happening. I know that the Iditarod said that they're going to move forward. They talked about that well back in April or May. They said, we're going to do it, and we're full steam ahead. I'm sure a big question going around the mushing community is, why don't you guys just take the year off, reset, get everything back in gear, and move forward? And I say that because just a couple of months ago, about the time we recorded our first episode, you guys had put out a GoFundMe or something very similar where you were looking for donations so you could move forward into the next year. I'm sure a lot of folks are saying, why don't just kick back, save the money in the bank, and wait till next year?
Well, that's a valid point, and that is a question that we are asking, which is more viable to the long-term sustainable future to the Yukon Quest. But as it stands right now, we've decided to move forward with a 300-mile race. Now, does that mean that come December, something is, nobody knows what's going to happen. I mean, you go through the season and you're training and everything else, and you're signed up for a race, and something happens and they have to cancel. There's not enough snow, there's not enough ice, there's not enough whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And that happens every year for a lot of different venues. And so it's not to say that it won't happen for the Yukon Quest, but we're not planning on that. We're planning on putting on a race and moving forward.
That's a great point. Even at our local club, the Chugach Dog Mushers Association, we're talking about our dryland race. And we just made a decision this past week where we said we have to plan as if the race is going to take place. And, we're in the same predicament as you guys, except our race is going to be happening in October versus in February. And we said we just have to keep going as if it's going to happen. And I think that's sort of the same track that you're on, as well as you, as meaning the Yukon Quest, as well as some of these other races that are planning on happening, including Iditarod and the Pedigree Stage Stop and all of those. So my last question to you, Della, is in regard to the purse. And of course, a lot of the sponsorship dollars go towards the purse for these big time races. They are tens of thousands of dollars that goes to the top contenders. I'm not sure exactly where it stands in the Yukon Quest, but in Iditarod, I believe it's in the top 20. They get a portion of the purse. Where does that stand right now? If you guys had and again, I don't have my numbers in front of me, but let's say you had a $50,000 purse last year. What are you thinking about this year with everything so far up in the air?
Well, me personally, as someone who is accustomed with sponsorship, procurement, and licensing and marketing, the goal is always bigger and better than what you did before. I mean, that's just a given. You want to improve, right? You want to improve on what you have to offer. However, I'm not certain that that's able to happen, just purely because of the pandemic. Businesses are closing their doors. They're like, this COVID virus has caused companies that have been around for hundreds of years to go out of business. It's shocking. And so it is quite possible that the dollars won't be there. And so the dollars won't be there in the value that it has been in the past years. So then, as a sponsorship procurement individual, I'm switching gears and thinking, well, if cash money isn't there, what can we bring to the table, or the trail, so to speak, to get mushers to sign up for this race? Well, there's value, there's goods, there's there's several different there are several items a musher needs throughout the year in order to maintain their training and things like that. And if you can offer those as purse prizes in lieu of cash, it still makes it a desired event to participate in. Booties, or just throwing stuff out there like booties. If you can get a company to donate 50,000 booties, or that's an outrageous number, but you know what I mean? So you have to think outside the box. And if we're not offering cash, what can we offer to a musher that makes this a viable race that offsets costs for the rest of the season? Because the whole premise of a musher in a sled dog kennel of doing the races is to help recoup, one, the competition. They enjoy that. They enjoy being on the trail with their dogs and seeing other teams and the camaraderie of the mushers and the enjoyment of being out there on the trail. And then comes the aspect of the competitiveness of it. And then comes the aspect of recouping their investment.
These are very interesting times because, folks sign up only because there's a purse. It has to make financial sense to them to, number one, travel there and pay for it and all of that. And, folks sign up for much smaller races. I'm talking club races because there is a purse involved. Maybe it's $1,000 or $10,000 or whatever. If they have a chance of winning, that's going to draw the competitors down, and I'm sure that you and I can both agree that cash money is definitely king over 1,000 booties. I would love to have $1,000 in my pocket to be able to spend it as I wish versus 1,000 booties that I may or may not need. I may have a booty sponsor. I don't know. So very interesting questions indeed, and I'm sure that there are lots more questions that you guys are trying to figure out and answer as you move forward. But Della, we're almost out of time here. Where can folks, number one, follow you on social media personally, and then how can folks follow the Yukon Quest?
Well, the Yukon Quest, we have, of course, our website, yukonquest.com, and on social media, it's Yukon Quest. I believe we have an Instagram account as well. And that, of course, is linked to the Facebook account. And then we have a Z account where you can go and look at photos and upload your Yukon Quest photos and things like that. Basically, if you do a search for Yukon Quest, it takes you directly to all of our pages. And to find me personally on social media is very simple, just my first and last name. And there's a photo of me I'm in a hat. I did some sort of dog mushing related cover photo. And I do that intentionally because I am involved with the Yukon Quest, and it makes logical sense if people are trying to locate me on social media.
Very good.
Because of the Yukon Quest.
And we'll definitely post links all over the show notes page for sure. We'll put a bio to you as well as the links. Thank you very much for joining us today here on Mushing Radio. We'll talk again soon, okay?
Thank you so much for having me, Robert. I appreciate it. You guys do an amazing job.
Thank you.
And I appreciate you.
All right, very good. We'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.
From First Paw Media, this is DogWorks Radio. We hope you enjoyed this podcast, and we invite you to subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find a link on the episode notes. You can tap or swipe on the episode cover art, and you'll see some offers from our sponsors. You can support our show by supporting them. If you like what you have heard, we would love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe too. Your hosts are Robert and Michelle Forto. Our producer is Robert Forto and created for First Paw Media.